Escalate the situation, and those three things together hopefully will then lead to a conversation and even protest over what may have been an unjustified killing. And I think that that's just important to focus on, because you want to protect the community tonight, which is essentially in harm's way as well with some of this violence.
And it must be so frustrating to folks in Atlanta who are watching. They see this building in flames, potentially spreading, and firefighters can't even get close to the scene.
It is, I mean, it's hard for, it's hard to watch that, I recognize that, but you're just making tactical decisions at this stage, which is, you need to, first of all, you need to protect your first responders, in particular the firefighters who are not armed. So you don't want to escalate a situation in which police have to come in to save firefighters if situations get out of hand. So these decisions are made all the time. And then you want to try to minimize the impact of what the fire, of the fire spreading. We can't see it, but just the way firefighter incident command works is there is likely firefighters prepared to ensure that it does not spread past the Wendy's. The Wendy's is essentially gone. We see that now. You just want to make sure it doesn't spread. So it's frustrating to see, but there's just a prioritization at this stage, which is to protect the community and to protect the free expression of protest against another police shooting.
All right, Juliet, stand by. It's the top of the hour. It's 11 p.m. Here on the East Coast of the United States. Once again, we want to welcome our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. This is a special edition of the Situation Room, and we're following the breaking news out of Atlanta. It's been one site of the nationwide protest for 19 days now following the killing of George Floyd. But tonight, a new name is being chanted there. That name, Rayshard Brooks. Right now, deep anger and frustration have erupted. Protesters have set fire to the Wendy's where police shot and killed Brooks last night after an altercation in the parking lot there. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation says police were called in around 10:30 p.m. About a man simply sleeping in a car in a Wendy's drive-thru. Police say Brooks failed a field sobriety test, then resisted arrest. We have videos of what ensued, and I'm going to try to walk you through those videos, but I want to warn all of our viewers, these videos are disturbing. Look at this. In this video, taken by a bystander, you can see a struggle. The yellow object in the officer's hand is a taser. Eventually, Brooks appears to swing at an officer before taking off with his taser. Let's watch together. Surveillance video picked up where that video ends. And again, I want to warn our viewers, this also disturbing. You can see Brooks running from the police. At one point, he appears to turn back towards the police officer and discharge the taser before turning back around and continuing to run. You then see him fall to the ground. Here's the moment Brooks appears to discharge the taser, and the officer fires once more in slow motion. Here's what the attorney representing the Brooks family said happened next.
We talked to some witnesses today who said that the officers went and put on plastic gloves and picked up their shell casings after they killed him, before rendering aid. We counted 2 minutes and 16 seconds before they even checked his pulse. And people wonder why everyone's bad. Just watch the video as he lays there dying. The officers stand around. One kicks him and flips him over. And then the witnesses tell us that, which we can't see on camera, but they filmed it. They went and picked up the shell casings. I wonder why. So that all of you can't know how far away he was when they shot? So that you can't find their positions when they use that weapon? But they appear to be caring more about covering their tracks than providing aid.
All right, let's go to Atlanta right now. Natasha Chen is on the scene for us. Update our viewers, Natasha, on what you're seeing.
Well, Wolf, we had to leave this scene, and I will show you here the cell phone video, the very last video that I was able to get before we had to leave. And those were the moments when people started attacking the Wendy's building, essentially. We saw people throwing things through the window, breaking the glass. At one point, seeing some people go in there, another person starting to set fire to an umbrella on the patio outside. And we understand, just from my conversation in the last 30 minutes with the Atlanta Fire Department, that the fire is inside the dining room, spreading through the drive-through, that the fire department right now cannot access the building because of the number of people in the streets. They would need assistance. They would need backup to be able to do that. And right now, because there are no reports of people inside that building, and nor does it seem like the fire is spreading to other structures at this time, they are on standby watching this, monitoring to make sure it doesn't get even worse. And I also want to show you a little bit of video from earlier in the evening, a moment when tear gas was deployed. And this came right after a crowd was gathered around a squad car, trying to block the police car in. And shortly after that, that's when we saw the tear gas and actually a flashbang. It was really just in the moments right after that I ran into the cousins of Rayshard Brooks, people I had met earlier in the day when protests were very peaceful. Here's what one of the cousins said to me in that moment, reacting to that tear gas and to the protest.
Ignorance doesn't have a color. It doesn't have a white or black. It's you either have sense or you don't. We all people, but because you have a badge, it doesn't say I do what I want to do. It says that you're supposed to uphold the law for people that cannot. That's what we pay taxes for. And for so many dumb reasons, this shouldn't be happening.
This right here, you're talking about the...
I mean, I understand the anger, I understand the hurt, but how does it help?
And another cousin walked up while we were talking, and he made sure to tell me he wanted the message to be, please keep it peaceful. And of course, just an hour or so later, we saw people getting onto the interstate. And then, of course, when they started moving the crowd toward the Wendy's, and we were recording both with my cell phone and with our CNN camera, there were a couple of protesters, not the ones actually breaking into the Wendy's, but ones on the sidewalk, people trying to block our view, stop us from recording, and they were very angry that we were recording this. And during the scuffle, that's when our CNN camera broke, and our crew decided that at that moment, given what was happening around us, it was best for us to back out of there, Wolf.
And just to remind our viewers, are you and your colleagues, the photojournalists, as well as the security personnel who was there with you, our producer, everybody okay?
Yes, thank you for asking. Everyone is okay. We've reconvened, as you can see, in another part of Atlanta here at CNN Center.
And the part of Atlanta where all this is taking place, Natasha, you know this area well, not too far, I'm told, from Turner Field, where the Atlanta Braves used to play baseball, right?
Yes, and it is south of downtown and very close to the interstate, and that's why people were easily able to climb up the hillside there, just half a block up from the Wendy's. Now, the state troopers, the officers, they had lined up their squad cars and themselves to block the base of those ramps for those protesters not to be able to walk up the ramps, but the people just went around them and went up the hillside, up the grassy hillside to the interstate itself.
And we're seeing police en masse arriving now at the scene. Some of the protesters beginning to disperse as a result, but you see the long line of police officers getting closer and closer. We did see some firefighters beginning their process of trying to stop this fire from expanding from that Wendy's. This is an awful situation that has unfolded in Atlanta right now. And Natasha, is I-75, which is very close to where these police officers right now, is that open or is it still partially blocked?
I don't know the exact status at this moment, but as we were leaving the scene, I did notice that the freeway was completely blocked with cars at a standstill. So I think that they were really trying to get traffic moving again. I know that was a difficult thing for them to try to navigate.
All right, and Natasha, I'm glad you and your colleagues are okay. We'll stay in very close touch with you. Charles Ramsey is still with us, CNN law enforcement analyst, the former D.C. police chief, former Philadelphia police commissioner. So, Chief Ramsey, you see the police officers moving in a long line towards that area where the blaze is coming from. You see some firefighters, the truck there on the scene. They're trying to get in place to deal with this, and they're trying to disperse the protesters. Looks like most of those protesters have in fact dispersed, but tell us what your understanding is. This is still an extremely dangerous situation, especially with the fire erupting the way it has. Chief Ramsey,
yeah,
there.
it is. I mean,
yeah.
You know, my biggest concern with the fire is the fact you have a gas station right across the street there, and those embers, the way they blow, could actually cause more of a problem. But I think as far as protesters go, I mean, I just don't think they're going to bother the firefighters. So you have to move them back for their own safety, and I think that's what you're saying now. So the firemen can get in there and do what they do, and that's put out the fire and secure that particular structure.
Because as you know, Chief Ramsey, if there are any gas tanks, anything like that, there could be explosions,
Well, yeah.
which could be very dangerous.
Exactly right, and that's why I think it was some urgency to try to get that fire under control. Not so much because a Wendy's was burning, but the fact of what's nearby it that could cause an even larger problem. And of course, with all the people out there and standing around, you're putting them at risk as well. So I think they're doing the right thing. Clear that area, let the firemen do what they do, and then the whole area will be a lot more secure.
Let me get Cheryl Dorsey, retired LAPD sergeant, in this conversation. What's your analysis right now, Cheryl, of what you're seeing?
Well, I would just say that the chief is correct in that the officers are going to create a path and a safe way for the firefighters to come in and do what they need to do. But Wolf, let me double back to the conversations that we were having about what needs to happen and say another name that I think a lot of people have forgotten about. There's been much said about Walter Scott, but there's another young black man who fell asleep in a drive-through, Willie McCoy, killed by Vallejo Police Department. And so what I know, Wolf, is that as a patrol officer and a patrol supervisor, the things that are being talked about and bantered around about what should be changed in the ivory tower over on the ATL Police Department means nothing to patrol officers. And unless and until you hold officers personally accountable for the bad doing, this is going to continue to happen. And it's a real easy fix. Officers who commit policy violations, criminal acts, need to be removed from the department. They should probably be stripped of their post-peace officer standard and training certification so they can't go to another department and criminally charged. Once that starts happening, then we'll train officers that when you do bad deeds, bad things happen.
Yeah, that's an important point. Cedric Alexander is with us still as well, the former president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and you were Cedric was also the public safety director of DeKalb County, which is right near Atlanta as well. So the police have lined up; they're blocking off the area to allow firefighters to do their job. But this is clearly still an awful situation, Cedric, and very, very dangerous.
A very dangerous situation. It's probably going to be a long night as well, too, for the city. Because as time goes on, it's going to continue to possibly escalate. But you see officers there moving in, and they're trying to set up perimeters, it appears to be, and doing what they need to do to try to keep those that are out there protesting safe, but also trying to keep the adjoining community is safe as well. So they are up for a big challenge there tonight.
Yeah, and their immediate mission, Cedric, is to let the firefighters do their job and stop the blaze, stop the fire from expanding and destroying, first of all, more property, but endangering lives at the same time. You see that Texaco gas station right nearby.
Yeah, and that's a very risky, very dangerous situation there, because we don't know still maybe whether there's other tanks underground there that may explode, and that could have devastating effects on anybody that's in and around there. So it's going to be a very tough job for our firemen there tonight, for their firefighters there tonight. But I think everybody's going to be in for the long haul, because it's going to be a long evening there into the night. But I can only encourage people who are out there tonight, please cooperate with the authorities that are out there to keep you safe, so that you can protest peacefully, because that's hugely important, so that you don't lose focus of the reason for being there, and that is to contest what happened to Mr. Brooks last night. So please try to remain calm. Protest as much as you want, but do it peacefully.
Yes, good advice from Cedric. Cornell William Brooks is still with us as well. Step back a little bit, Cornell. Give the big picture, the awful situation that has unfolded. You're the former president and CEO of the NAACP. You're now at the Harvard Kennedy School. But step back a little bit and explain to our viewers here in the U.S. and around the world why this situation in Atlanta has exploded the way it has over these past few hours.
Well, this situation is tragically classic. So having participated in many peaceful protests and demonstrations around the country, and traveled to crises in terms of police brutality, what we see is a police homicide going viral by means of a video. People responding to it with outrage and anger. And we often see a glacial response. In this particular instance, in Atlanta, we see a faster response. But the problem is that this video, this police homicide, occurs in the wake of Ahmaud Arbery. It occurs in the wake of Philando Castile, George Floyd, G.B.R. Rice, Breonna Taylor, and so many others. And so we reach this point where the people have simply experienced too much. And so what we have is this dynamic where
escalate the situation, and those three things together hopefully will then lead to a conversation and even protest over what may have been an unjustified killing. And I think that that's just important to focus on, because you want to protect the community tonight, which is essentially in harm's way as well with some of this violence.
I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare. Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future. But I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul-searching and agonizing moments. And I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism. And I think the realistic fact is that we still have a long, long way to go.
I come here tonight and plead with you. Believe in yourself and believe that you're somebody. As I said to the group last night, nobody else can do this for us. No document can do this for us. No Lincolnian Emancipation Proclamation can do this for us. No Kennisonian or Johnsonian Civil Rights Bill can do this for us. If the Negro is to be free, he must move down into the inner resources of his own soul and sign with a pen and ink of self-assertive manhood his own Emancipation Proclamation. Don't let anybody take your manhood. Be proud of our heritage. As somebody said earlier tonight, we don't have anything to be ashamed of. Somebody told a lie one day. They couched it in language. They made everything black, ugly, and evil. Look in your dictionary and see the synonyms of the word black. There's always something degrading and low and sinister. Look at the word white. It's always something pure, high, and clean. But I want to get the language right tonight. I want to get the language so right that everybody here will cry out, yes, I'm black, I'm proud of it, I'm black and beautiful. All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say, we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
I don't think any of us can be satisfied in the United States until that war is brought to an honorable end and American soldiers are brought back into the United States.
One day, we will have to stand before the God of history. And we will talk in terms of things we've done, It seems that I can hear the God of history saying, that was not enough. But I was hungry, and ye fed me not.
I have a dream. My four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare. Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future. But I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul-searching and agonizing moments. And I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism. And I think the realistic fact is that we still have a long, long way to go, and that we are involved in a war on Asian soil, which, if not checked and stopped, can poison the very soul of our nation. I'm not going to say that all of our problems will be solved if the war in Vietnam is ended, but I do say that the war makes it infinitely more difficult to deal with these problems. When a nation becomes obsessed with the guns of war, it loses its social perspective, and programs of social uplift suffer. This is just a fact of history, so that we do face many more difficulties as a result of the war. It's much more difficult to really arouse a conscience during a time of war. That is something about a war like this that makes people insensitive. It dulls the conscience. It strengthens the forces of reaction, and it brings into being bitterness and hatred and violence. I think the biggest problem now is that we got our gains over the last 12 years at bargain rate, so to speak. It didn't cost the nation anything. In fact, it helped the economic side of the nation to integrate lunch counters and public accommodations. It didn't cost the nation anything to get the right to vote established. And now we are confronting issues that cannot be solved without costing the nation billions of dollars. Now, I think this is where we're getting our greatest resistance. They may put it on many other things, but we can't get rid of slums and poverty without it costing the nation something. I feel that nonviolence is really the only way that we can follow, because violence is just so self-defeating. A riot ends up creating many more problems for the Negro community than it solves. You can, through violence, burn down a building, but you can't establish justice. You can murder a murderer, but you can't murder murder through violence. You can murder a hater, but you can't murder hate. And what we are trying to get rid of is hate and injustice and all of these other things that continue the long night of man's inhumanity to man.
When we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be